Hey friends, welcome to Flight Test Tech. I'm Josh. Today we're going to be showing you how to build our new FT Easy Space Shuttle. Now this FT Easy Space Shuttle can be flown great as a chuck glider, and it can also be flown as an Easy. And if you don't know what an Easy is, it is our 2-channel gyro stabilized flight controller that is so popular getting people both in the hobby, but also in the classroom. Now in this build video, we're going to show you how to do both, but also there's an incredible curriculum that's been developed for the classroom and for home-based educators that uses basically weight and balance, center of gravity, and how to distribute your loads and get the best glide ratio. It's an incredibly fun curriculum that's going to be used in this product right here. The tools that we're going to need for this build is simply a hot glue gun. Feel free to keep those markers handy as well, because after we're done building this, it's always fun to decorate them. You're going to also notice that our kit for this Easy includes actually 2 space shuttles. So you can build one as a chuck glider and the other one as an Easy, or if you're building as a family or a group, both these airplanes are capable of being powered by the Easy Power Pack. Let's go ahead and pop out all of our pieces, we'll identify them, and then we'll separate the 2 kits. Now that we have all of our pieces popped out, let's go ahead and identify each of the components. As you can see here, we have 2 complete kits, complete with what you need to also make this either a chuck glider or fly off of our Easy Power Pack. We have the upper and lower portions of our fuselage. We have our 2 nose doublers, and also we have our payloads. And included in our payloads are going to be some 1/4-20 nuts. These are going to serve as weight and balance. Now a little tip here, we give you extra nuts for weight and balance, but you do not need to use all of these. In the curriculum, you're going to see that we're going to be only referencing oftentimes using 1 or 2 weights, but we wanted to give you plenty for experimentation or in case one falls out. We also have our Easy Power Pack motor mounts. This is the same for both of our kits, so feel free to pause this video at this moment and make sure that all of your pieces look just like what you see here with the foam areas removed. Now that we have everything popped out, let's go ahead and separate one of our kits because we're going to focus on our first one being a chuck glider. Our first job is to establish the proper amount of dihedral in our wing. Dihedral is going to be very important for many applications of different aircraft because dihedral gives us a level of inherent stability. This is done because when the wingtips are raised just slightly, as the plane banks one side or the other, the lower wing generates more lift and helps it correct itself. And the way that we're going to get the proper dihedral for this airplane is we're going to be using our 2 nose doublers to raise up the center of our wing just enough so that the wingtips can drop down against the table. So if you haven't already, go ahead and make both wingtips relax a little bit. We're going to lay this down just like you see here, and we're going to make sure that the center of the body is resting on the nose doublers and the wingtips can easily touch. This would be a really good opportunity to go to where your kit scraps are and rip off an extra piece of foam so you can use that as a squeegee and squeegee off any extra glue. Now that we've established our proper dihedral here and we practice it, I'm going to put a bead of glue down right on each open groove of our wing. You don't need to put an excessive amount of glue, and when you lay this down, you're going to notice that it will probably squeeze out just a little bit, and that's okay. We can go over with our squeegee and wipe off any extra that we may have. We're going to give this about 1.5 minutes to fully dry before we move on to our next step. Now that we've let this dry fully for about 1.5 minutes, we can lift this up and you can see that we have just the slightest amount of dihedral. That is all we need, and every one of our Easy planes will have a different amount of dihedral to get it the best flight performance. But also, as you design airplanes in the future, you can take similar models and their dihedral and you can learn from that when you're designing your own to get the best stability. Now that we have our wing done, we're going to be facing this face up and putting on the side here, and we're going to be putting our attention towards our main fuselage piece. Now you're going to notice on our main fuselage piece that we have etching in it that gives you your windows and your in-front nose piece. This will be useful later on when you want to maybe decorate it or color this in the classic matte black, but also we want those to face out and not to glue those inwards. We're going to go ahead and first practice here, and we're going to take note that on the back side that this portion here is not glued yet, and that's exactly what we want. After we made sure that our piece fully lines up around the top and all around the sides, we can lift this up and we're going to put just a simple bead of glue right down. More glue definitely does not mean more weight, and you don't need a whole lot here. Now we're going to slide this down into place. Just make sure our edges are all nice and flush and that the center of our wing groove is flush with the bottom. Now we're going to do the same process on the other side. Again, we're going to do a quick test fit. Always good to do a test fit before we glue things down, just so we have that muscle memory, but also we can make sure everything looks good. And once again, we're going to avoid this area from the point here down and not put any glue right here. flip it over, slide it into place. Then we can use the table as our friend and press down. All right, so at this point here, we have the nose doubler on both sides of our fuselage, and now we can go ahead and slide in our main wing. When we slide in our main wing, we're gonna make sure that the score cuts for both the elevator and the wingtips are facing downwards, along with the etch marks that you see here. It's really important, especially when you're doing the easy, that this etch mark on the very back here is facing down, and if you're in the pilot seat, that's facing to your left. And speaking of which, if you plan on making this an easy, it's much easier now to go ahead and take your thumbnail and then pull out this extra foam, making the relief point for where our control board's gonna go. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that because later on, we're gonna be putting the easy control board in this. Now with our etch marks and everything facing down, we're gonna slide this in very carefully. And I'm just gonna use the table as my friend. I'm gonna press this all the way down to where it stops. At this point, you're gonna notice that all of our grooves will slide nicely in and it'll meet on the back. And this very back here, you're gonna see a gap here. We're gonna wanna rotate that up ever so slightly to make sure that it makes contact with the lower motors. This positive elevator pitch is gonna be what gives us the ability to have this plane glide very nicely. So it's very important that we do this. Now we can go in with 4 simple beads of glue. I'm just gonna choose to do right here at the front nose on both sides. And then right here on the back. We can again use the table as our friend. And we can hold this down firmly against the table and we can make sure this is 90 degrees. An easy way to make sure this is 90 degrees is to simply take one of our payloads that are going to go in the space shuttle and hold that down and use that as a right angle to get our perfect 90-degree mark. Hold this for about a minute and let it fully dry. Now that our fuselage is dry, we're going to go ahead and move back to the elevator, and you can see that this can move down very slightly. All we simply need to do is put a drop of glue right between the motor and the top of our elevator and lift that up and hold it. It's really important when you lift this up that there's no gap in between the top of the elevator and the bottom of the motor. We're going to give this about a minute and a half to fully dry to make sure that it's firmly up against the bottom of the fuselage. Now that our elevator is dried, we're going to flip this over upside down and we're going to open up our fuselage doublers just a little bit so we can do a quick test fit of our bottom of our fuselage. Once we've confirmed that everything pops in nice and clean, we can come back here and we can put a bead of glue on the very front of the bottom of the fuselage, on the very back, and then I'm going to come along in here and I'm going to put 3 stripes of glue right on the recessed piece of the fuselage, right where it meets. So I'll go ahead and start right now with our 3 little stripes of glue. Make sure you stop and start just on the inside of each one so it doesn't squeeze over and make a mess. And then again, I'm going to put a bead of glue right on the front and right on the back. And while I'm at it here, I'm going to put a small bead of glue right down the inside there. And we're going to slide this in and press it into place. And again, we don't need to use a ton of glue whenever we're doing these. A little goes a long way. Now at this moment, our FT Easy Space Shuttle is now ready for its first test glides. You are going to notice that there's 2 little holes here, and those 2 little holes are going to be a reference mark to where the space shuttle should hopefully balance very nicely. And you can see that looks very close to perfect. Let's go ahead and step out of the studio. We're going to put this up for a flight, and then we're also going to bring our payloads with us and show you how easy it is to change the characteristics of your airplane. All right, so we have our FT Easy Space Shuttle all built. By itself, this should glide pretty good. We're gonna put this to the test right now with my good friend Stefan. Now it's really important if you've never thrown a chuck glider before, you don't throw it like a football overhanded. You actually throw it more like a dart where you're pushing it at your target. So in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and grip this right ahead where our battery's gonna go. I'm gonna point it at Stefan, and I'm gonna let it glide.
Look at that guy. Well, I like the windows.
You like the windows? Yeah. Awesome. Now you can see that we have just a little bit of nose down tendency, so I'm just going to give it a little bit more elevator into it. There it is.
Oh, yes sir. This is the best glider of all time.
And you can see, out of all of our gliders, This guy does fantastic.
See that?
All right, so now that we've test glided this here, we're happy with this, we've made our adjustments. Now we're gonna start introducing payload. And like I mentioned before, we give you more weights that you need. I'm gonna go and pop out all of our weights here. And imagine our first task is to put a single payload in here. Where would you put it and why would you put it there? Well, maybe we'd put it more towards the back or more towards the front. All we have to do is experiment. So in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and pop one single weight in here. I'm just gonna pinch the edge of my payload, make it pass through nice and clean. And let's see what happens.
Whoa. Yeah. Nice.
You can see that has a slightly more nose high attitude because we're starting to play with the tail heavy. Let's go ahead and pop in 3 weights and see what happens. Definitely something not as good, huh? Let's go ahead and move that up 1. And we'll go to just 2 weights.
A little more like a dart.
A little bit more like a dart. So you can see by changing your payload, changing the weight of your payload, it's very important to get the best glide slope. Even though your glider will glide really good without any payloads, when you put payload in it, you still want to preserve those characteristics. Our next step here is we're going to go back into the studio, we're going to remove these payloads, and we're going to show you how to make this a full flying radio controlled airplane. All right, friends, by now we've built our FT Easy Space Shuttle. We've had a lot of fun gliding it, and hopefully you've experimented with payloads going back and forth. At this point, we're gonna take it one step further, and we're gonna make this fully RC using our FT Easy Power Pack V2. Now, if you're new to FT Easy Power Packs, this is a gyro-stabilized power pack that basically uses the motors and the thrust of the motors to steer and make the plane climb or dive. It's also stabilized so it automatically levels. 2 things I'd like you to do right now, if you haven't done already, is go ahead and place 3 AA batteries on the very back of your transmitter so it can turn on. And also, let's go ahead and put our battery on charge using the included battery and the battery charger here. This simply just plugs into a USB, and all you need to do is plug the USB into your controller and then plug your battery in. Now that we have our transmitter and our onboard battery charging, we can go ahead and put our attention towards our Easy Power Pack. In our Easy Power Pack, you're gonna see a blue and a red motor, and they're also gonna be labeled right and left. Now, anytime we're referring to right or left, it's gonna be in reference as if we're the pilot inside of the aircraft. So I'm gonna put our space shuttle with the tail facing towards me. Our left motor is gonna go on the left, and our right's gonna go on the right. Included in our kit, you're gonna see our little tiny motor mounts. These motor mounts are gonna clip in very nicely on the very back. Now, it's really important when we mount our motor mounts that the motor is on the bottom of the motor mount. If the motor's on the top of the motor mount, it's gonna force the plane down and it's not gonna climb very well. Let's go ahead and put a little drop of glue on top of our motors, and we'll push the motor mount all the way to where it grips the back, and then we're gonna hold it nice and flat. We're gonna let this dry for about 30 seconds, and we're gonna do the same process on the other side. Again, we're holding our motor mount in the direction with the motor pointing towards the rear. We're making sure our motor clips on the very bottom, like you see here. And then using 2 little drops of glue, we can glue it in place. And again, we're gonna hold it down. Now we're gonna go ahead and flip our space shuttle over on the back, recognizing that when we flip this over, our rights and lefts are gonna switch. Now the kit that you guys are gonna be receiving, you're gonna see a little laser etched left and right. That will give you the indication on which side to put your motor mount. So here you can see that we have our right side of our etching, we have our right motor mount, and all we need to do is glue this and line up the etch marks perfectly. A little bit of glue. And we're gonna slide this in place and let it dry. Feel free to pass our motor lead right on through this little access hole right in the center. And we're gonna do the same process now on the other side. Once again, we're gonna be making sure that our motor mount is facing up, that we line it up with the etch marks. And once we're happy with that, we'll put a little bit of glue inside the etch marks and glue it down. Make sure you hold this for about 30 seconds to let it fully dry before letting go of it. If the motor has any unique angle to it, that's gonna be the direction of the thrust pushes. Included in our FT Easy Pack is our flight control board. You're gonna notice our flight control board has a main battery lead, a power switch, and an LED indicator that can also be turned on and off by pressing the lights button on your transmitter. This little red connector and our white connector that you see right here are going to be our two connectors that our motors push into. All we simply need to do is match up red for red and white for white. It's always a little bit easier to guide the white connector through before we glue on the control board and then plug it in. There we go. All right, now that I passed my white lead through, I'm going to plug my red one in first just to make it easy. Make sure that your pins line up nice and easy and then it presses in easy. If you ever have to remove your motor, make sure that you don't pull on the cable. Make sure that you put your fingernail in between where the connectors meet and lift from there. Pulling on the cable is simply just going to destroy the connector and ruin your motor. All right, we're going to do our second connector here. Again, I'm just going to lay this down, let it line up with the pins, and press it in with my finger. Now it's up to you. You can either use a zip tie around this section right here, or you can simply use a drop of hot glue. It's easy to break it free at any time that you want. For me here, I'm going to go ahead and use a drop of hot glue. If you are a teacher or an educator, a zip tie simply wrapped around will work just fine as well. I'm going to lay that down in that slot that we opened up earlier in the video, and I'm going to press that firmly. Now it's really important that we make sure that our battery lead is on the left side of the fuselage and also pointing forward. I'm going to hold this for about 30 seconds here and let it fully dry. A little tip to get the most life out of your flight control boards is to put a little drop of glue reinforcement right on the bottom, allowing your antenna to go down vertically. This is going to give you the best range possible for your flight controller and your transmitter, and it's also going to reinforce your antenna so it doesn't break after many uses. Now we can simply take either a drop of hot glue or a small piece of tape and simply dress up our wires so they don't hang loosely. So at this point, our space shuttle is now ready to be flown with our FT-Easy power pack. There's one thing left that we have to do. We got to take our charged battery in, and the charged battery is now going to be our payload that we slide back and forth on the lower slot that you see right here. This is going to be what helps us manage our center of gravity, and keep in mind that every plane is slightly different, which means your battery placement may be different as well. And you're going to notice if I put my two fingers where the center of gravity marks are, I'm a little bit tail heavy. So just like what we learned with our payloads in our space shuttle, I'm going to slide this on through. I like to just keep it horizontal just like our payloads were, and I'm going to put that slightly in front of our center of gravity. Let's see how that balances out now. So this is going to be my starting point for our first flight here, and at this point we can move the battery forward and backward to change the flight characteristics to what we like the most. To power on our airplane, all we simply need to do is make our connection. If our switch isn't already forward, we're going to push it forward and turn it on. You're going to see a rapid flashing red light. At this point we're going to leave this steady on the table. I'm going to turn my transmitter on. You're going to see the moment I turn my transmitter on, this recognizes that there's a transmitter turned on looking for a signal. The way I'm going to bind these two, I'm going to move all the way to full throttle and then all the way down. At this point, the transmitter is now buzzed, and you can see that this light has gone solid. Now there's a couple really cool features on this transmitter. One is our rates mode, and for this application, we're going to press on our upper right-hand button, and you're going to notice that we get now a flashing light on our transmitter. This means that you're in high rates. If you're flying in a small backyard or in an area where you want to be able to turn quicker, this is going to be the setting you're going to always want to be in for your very first flight. The button on the other side is to control our lights. If you choose to use the optional lights that we sell in our store, they simply plug into the upper white connectors on the very top. You can turn both the lights and your LED indicator on and off by pressing this button. Let's go ahead and check the direction of our motors here. If we power this on, you can see we have a nice even thrust going forward, and whenever we turn it, you can actually hear the motor and feel the motor opposing it, trying to keep it on a straight trajectory. This means that everything's working properly, and we can now take this out for its very first flight. All right, friends, so we have our FT-Easy space shuttle all built here. We've already built it. We've tested it on the workbench. Now is the point where we get to fly it here. Now, it's really important anytime you fly, you always want to be able to launch any model aircraft into the wind and land it into the wind. In this case, it's kind of coming from my forward right here direction, so that's the direction I'm going to fly it. Just like we did before, we're going to power on the main control board first. We're going to power on our transmitter by pressing the button, full throttle, close throttle. And our last step here is we're going to go ahead and press our upper right hand button to activate high rates. At this point, let's go ahead and take it up and see how it flies. We are very fortunate to have a gorgeous day here, but this even handles wind pretty well. Look at that. Now I'm just about 2/3 throttle. Keep in mind the extra power from the Easy Power Pack can take some of our models vertical, but you can see full throttle here. Handles it just nicely. And you can see we have a nice gentle descent. Anytime you go below half throttle, you're gonna have a descent. Anytime you go above half throttle, it should be climbing. There we are. Friends, I want to thank you for being part of the Flite Test family. Thank you so much for the opportunity to build and create with you too. And whether you're in the classroom, whether you're building at home or with friends and family, I hope this was a rewarding experience for you, and I can't wait to build with you again. See you next time.